go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gift of Crisis Video Summit. My name is Bridget Jackson-Buckley, and I am your host and very excited to be with you today. The focus of the summit interviews is to talk about the possibilities that are inherent in our most difficult moments and how we can reframe crisis to see it as a gift. During our conversation today, we'll talk about the crisis of depression and mental illness, how our guests learn to see crisis as an opening rather than a setback, and the practical tools she utilized to navigate change in her life. Joining me today is Nita Sweeney, the author of the running and mental health memoir, Depression Hates a Moving Target, How Running with My Dog Brought Me Back from the Brink. Nita teaches writing and meditation, blogs at Bum Glue, and publishes the monthly email newsletter, Right Now Columbus. She lives in Central Ohio with her husband, Ed, and their yellow Labrador retriever, Scarlet. Welcome, Nita.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. This is very exciting.
I know, I'm so happy to be here with you. So excited to talk with you. Okay, so let's just dive right in. Modern life can be exciting, and life with depression can be even more so. You write about this in Depression Hates a Moving Target, and how depression and mental illness took a debilitating toll on your life. So can you talk about this and how it eventually led to a situation of crisis for you and your family?
Well, I had been depressed most of my life. I'm actually bipolar, which wasn't diagnosed right away, but the depression was what most people saw. And so I would have these periods where I wasn't depressed, but I was always challenged. And then, and I went to therapy and I had medication, I had lots of good support. But in 2007, it seemed like everybody died. It started with my niece, who had been sick with cancer for 500 days, and she died. Actually, it was yesterday. It would have been 13 years ago she died. And then a friend of Ed's died, and then Ed's father died, and it just kept going on and on. Jamie's cat died. It was just a crazy year. And then in December of that year, on the 30th, my mother died. And so it was 7 people and a cat, all in a period of 11 months. And I just collapsed. I was in graduate school, and thankfully I was at Goddard, where they are really big on accommodations. And so they really helped me. I was very close to finishing already, and they helped me, but I got stuck on the sofa. I just got stuck on the sofa. I don't know how else to say it. And I was also having panic attacks and just all the various things that come with mental health issues. And so that's kind of where everything began. And what happened was, as I was sitting there one day, Facebook was kind of new to me. It was in 2010, I think. And I was scrolling on my laptop, and I saw the social media post of a friend of mine who I'd gone to high school with. She was in the class ahead of me, so she was like a year older than me. And she said in her post, "Call me crazy, but this running is getting to be fun." I thought, you have got to be kidding me, because neither one of us were athletes as children. I knew neither one of us were athletes now. And the idea of her running, she was just my age, at least as large as I was then, and she was running. And so I started watching this closely. And winter turned to spring. And one day I just got the courage up to look up the program, and it said 60 seconds of jogging. And I think if it had said 65 seconds of jogging, I might not have done it. But I just saw that as an opportunity, because I just felt like I needed something, that the crisis was so big that without something to turn it around, I don't know what would have happened, but and that's where it began. And what's happened as a result of all this is I'm now someone who can share my experience, because when I did start running, things changed very quickly. And within weeks, people started noticing a difference. Other people started noticing a difference before I did. That my mood was better, that I wasn't as negative when I was talking, things like that. Eventually, I also lost weight, which was a real plus. But But that experience has allowed me, and that's the gift. We're talking about the gift of
Mm-hmm.
crisis. That's the gift for me. That experience, if I hadn't gone that low and been able to find a way to come back and go beyond, I'm a different person. I wouldn't have the experience to share. So now I can reach out to other people and say, hey, I don't know if it's running for you. It might be yoga. It might be, I don't know, I don't know what it is, but some kind of exercise where you're walking, anything, just some form of movement, dance. It changed my life, and maybe you'd want to try that too. So that's kind of what the gift is for me. I never saw myself as someone who had a lot of, I don't know, it wasn't that I didn't have experience to share, but I didn't see myself as a, role model or leader or anything like that. I mean, I taught these classes, but I was kind of a behind the scenes person. And this experience has really transformed me so that I can see that our lowest moments can turn into great gifts. And so that's kind of where I'm at today.
They absolutely can. And that was a lot. 7 deaths. That seems difficult to get off the couch. I can't even imagine. So that made me wonder, that wasn't your first time that you were doing running, or was it?
Well, I had done running when I was in my 30s, so it would have been 20 years before.
Mhm.
But I was using it in a very unhealthy way. The whole goal was just to lose weight. There was nothing about feeling better. There was nothing about feeling a sense of accomplishment. Eventually, I did join a group. Nothing about fellowship or community. It was solely to lose weight, and sometimes, frankly, to punish myself. I was practicing law. I'd made partner. I was very, very stressed out all the time. And I kind of turned that on myself to need to look good. I was probably borderline anorexic because I had lost a ton of weight very quickly. And I was having all the symptoms of, hair falling out and things like that. And when things wouldn't go well, I would just go to the indoor track and just pound laps on the indoor track. It was just punishment. And the kind of running, that's sprinting. That's not what I do now. Now it's, sure, I want to run fast sometimes, but it's not about punishing myself. It's about joy. So it's almost as if I were doing two completely different activities. I can't compare them other than the fact that they're both, the same motion. It's just a completely different feeling about it.
I would imagine. But when you started it again, just a few years ago, there wasn't the initial, when you saw her post like that said this running thing is becoming fun. Of course, at that time, there was no joy. You weren't feeling any joy. I would imagine a lot of lethargy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in a really difficult situation, a crisis situation, what was it about that Facebook comment? Did it touch something within you? Did you feel curious? Because sometimes during crisis, I was going to say, we have these thoughts, or we may notice something that seems to tug internally at us, but we could dismiss it because it seems like the least logical thing to do in that circumstance. But of course, we're always receiving some sort of guidance, of some sort. And so it's up to us. We have the choice of what we want to do with what we're receiving. So what was it about that specific comment that made you get off the couch?
Well, I didn't do it right away. It took
Okay.
me probably, 3 or 4 months maybe. And part of what happened was spring came. And so I saw nature. In Ohio, the first thing that comes up are these little tiny purple flowers called crocuses. They're bulbs and they pop up and they're just tiny. And so I started to see that. But the thing I think about her post was it was someone I could relate to. She was my age. She was my size. She had never been athletic. We both rode horses and I was in marching band, things like that. But never on the cross country team or any of the other volleyball, basketball, any of those things in high school. And so when I thought of her, I related. And here she was doing something that seemed really difficult to me. And of course, I equated running with what I had done before. And so it took me a little bit to realize that that's not what she was doing. She was doing something, it was an interval training plan where you run a little bit, walk a little bit, run a little bit, so it was a very gradual thing. But it was that moment of relating, identifying, saying, this is someone like me who is doing something that seems almost impossible. And it was that moment of, maybe if she can do this, I can too. So I think it's one of those things, people ask me this all the time, and it's something that you can't give to someone else. I had many people remind me about how I had run before, talk to me about their own experience of how exercise helped their depression, help their physical ailments too, help them get, reduce their medications, all of those things. But it was that combination of being so low that I was reaching for something and having someone to whom I could relate, share their experience with me. Those were the two things for me that just one day I thought, all right, I'll give this a try. Now, mind you, I had to leash up the dog for emotional support and go down into a ravine where none of the neighbors could see me. So there was still, it wasn't like I went into this like, oh yes, I'm going to do this. No, we crept in. But it was a start. It was a start.
Before I go on to the next question, what did you mean by when you said that it's not something that you could give to someone else?
I have the sisters, the children, the parents, the employers, the employees of depressed people contact me and say, oh, I've got to give this person your book. She really needs it. And what they're hoping for is that I can somehow give that motivation to another person. And so I never say, oh, don't bother, because that's not true. But sometimes I will say, remember, the person has to be ready. It has to be their time. And hopefully it is. But that's what I'm saying. It's not the kind of thing where I can push somebody into it. And I have to be, or the person has to be at a place where they can hear the message and they're open to it. And hopefully what I say resonates too. Because I'm this, middle-aged woman from Central Ohio with a dog. Now, what's interesting is that mental health issues, a lot of times they cross a lot of boundaries. And so people will hear things whether they relate to me or not. And, I've had people in their 20s that don't even want to run that will tell me, you're telling my story. And I think, how's that? But it has to be, the person has to be at the right place. And so I say, yeah, give them the book and then be quiet, see what happens. Because the pushing sometimes can just make the person so much more depressed. The expectations, I write about that in the book, being afraid. I even tell my husband, I think it was a month before I actually told him that I had started jogging. And I called it jogging because running was too terrifying. Because I was afraid that he would think, oh, this is going to fix her. This will be the thing. And he'd been through the mini trampoline and the breathing exercises and the acupuncture and the da-da-da-da-da. So yeah, so that it's kind of a long answer to your question, but does that
it was great.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you that, you never know how, when, and where your message will land with someone. And it is important. I think people do that, will give the book with the best intentions, but you do have to just let it go, because people are ready when they're ready. And you do have to be open, not necessarily to do exactly what you did, but to find a way to apply some aspects of what you did in an original way in their own life. Like you said, it could be yoga. It could be walking. It could be something else. But when they're ready, they're ready. But what I really like is the way you write about how you started running in the book, because it is so accessible. I mean, it was so accessible to provide an example of how you can start. And I love the fact that you addressed that you felt self-conscious and embarrassed about it and tried to do it when you thought your neighbors couldn't see you. You talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm part of my mental health challenges is paranoia. And so that's something I still kind of fight. If I see a strange car on our street, we live in a suburban neighborhood, bedroom community. I see a strange car on the street. I'm the neighbor who knows, ooh, that car doesn't belong there. It's just a weird kind of natural curiosity. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I picked up the, it was a digital kitchen timer and leashed up the dog, I thought, there's no way I'm going to run down my street. There is just no way. And then I thought, actually, I'm not going to run down any street where anyone can see me. And so there's a ravine there. The lots are all kind of on a hill, and the bottom of the hill is a floodplain. So I call it Donna Ravine, but it's almost like a nature preserve, but it's just the back of these long lots. And so the houses are the backs of the houses face the street where the ravine is. So no one is looking out there. I mean, they weren't home anyway, honestly, but I wasn't taking any chances. And so we walked down there. My dog Morgan and I, my yellow lab, and then I sort of looked at him and said, okay, are we going to do this or not? And he sort of looked up at me and said, what is wrong with you? I mean, so the dog kind of has his whole personality, and that's just the way he is. He's like, nobody's watching. Let's go. I'm anxious. And so we did. But it was definitely I still say that. A lot of people say that too, that running is actually 90% mental. And this kind of thing, no matter what your crisis is, that's what you're dealing with. It's your mind. The opening line of my book is, my mind was trying to kill me again. And that's always where everything starts with me. It's these thoughts that are usually completely unrealistic, but some part of me believes.
Mm-hmm. And you also write about the scientific component of what running was doing for your brain. Can you talk about that a little bit as well?
Well, I did some research, just real basic. I mean, I'm not a scientist at all, but I found out that, people always talk about the endorphins. It's actually endocannabinoids. So it's the same stuff that's in pot, in marijuana. And that's what is generated by that kind of high you get from any kind of exercise where you're breaking a sweat, or even, you don't even have to break a sweat, but just raising your heart rate enough so that your breathing is a little more rapid, you're moving your muscles. And that really surprised me, because I just thought, oh, this is interesting. And that also explained the calm that I felt. So there's a sort of combination of a little more energy plus a sense of calm. And I thought, okay, I'll take that. And then there's other components, which I didn't get right away. But with runners, often if you run in any kind of a group, there's this sense of community, because running cuts across all cultures. I know people that I would never have met any other way that are in the running community. And we have running in common. And so you have this bond, this fellowship that raises your, that I think is endorphins. It's like the love. It's like eating dark chocolate, or, being in young love, all that kind of stuff. It's the same kind of feelings. And then there's the sense of accomplishment. So I like to check off boxes. I like to have lists and, write things off. And so I had this plan that was my interval plan. And then I would check off that I had done the plan. And there's this feeling inside of accomplishment. And there's a neurochemical that is creating that feeling. It's actually in your brain from doing that. And so those three things, the community, the sense of accomplishment, and the actual physical activity helped to boost my mood, in addition to these, endocannabinoids. So there's all these things going on. that I just had no idea when I was just jogging out with the dog.
So it sounds like what you're saying is the effects of running carry you even beyond running, the actual act of running, because you can't run all day. At some point, you have to be at home with whatever is going on, with your feelings about what's going on. But you're saying the physical act of running had a physiological effect that extended, lifted your mood, helped you to feel better, and also enabled you to do other practices like meditation. What else did you do?
Well, writing was one of the biggest things. I've always been a writer, and but I was always stuck. I would start and stop and change projects and things like that. And I believe that the concentration and the endurance that I got from running long distances helped me be able to finish projects that I couldn't finish. I was very scattered a lot of the time. And the other thing that happened was I was able to get off some of the medications, which I know now, I mean, I'm still on some, but some of the medications that really were keeping me alive had really strong side effects. And one of them was mental illness. And so when I got off one of the medications, it was really like a fog lifted. And so,
One of the
so there were lots of.
medications, I'm sorry, that you were taking
Mhm.
for the mental illness had a side effect of causing mental illness?
Well, it caused mental dullness. So it wasn't
Dullness.
mental illness, mental dullness. Did I misspeak? I might have misspoken. Yeah, it
Dullness.
just felt like a brain fog. It was like they talk about it with chemotherapy a lot. We get like a brain fog, and that's what I got was just sort of this tamping down of my ability to think clearly, my creativity. Of course, I was depressed, so I didn't have the motivation, and so it, kind of felt like the perfect storm where not only did I have more energy, but I was thinking more clearly because they didn't take me off things right away. They just my psychiatrist dropped the doses because she started seeing that I was just getting better. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I was just getting better. And she said, well, do you want to try this? Try just dropping the doses a little bit. And we did, and it worked. So, and now I'm on one. At one point I was on 6 meds. Now I'm on one. So, so all those things together kind of helped.
I mean, this sounds like a very heavy experience because
Yeah.
when you're, and not to make it sound light, but from the point of view that when you're dealing with trying and challenging situations, a lot of your experience is in your head.
Mm-hmm.
You're just what's going on, and you can be on a fault finding expedition of like, why is this happening to me? Why am I experiencing this? Where you're perpetuating a victim mentality. So to have the layer of depression and mental illness blanketing that just seems even more difficult. So it really sounds like the physical aspect, in your case running, but the physical aspect can have a profound effect on it, not to completely remove all of it, but have an uplifting effect on it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I really believe that what we're fighting with depression is inertia. And that's why the title of my book is Depression Hates a Moving Target. And I'm sure, I wasn't the first person to ever say that, but it's something I've been saying for years. I have these other friends that are also, chronically depressed, and we call each other, and it might be in the afternoon, and one of them might call me and say, I cannot get out of bed. And I would say, depression hates a moving target. Just sit up. Just sit up on the edge of the bed and see how you feel, and check in a few minutes later. And, she might call me back a little bit later. And it's like, okay, I'm dressed now. Or she might say, okay, I'm up, but I need to shower. And I'll say, okay, call me back after you shower. Depression needs a moving target. And that's what it felt like with depression a lot of times. It's almost like it's not like you're underwater, but I say it's like you're walking through pudding, which kind of doesn't make sense, but you just sort of feels like you just can't quite, it has this kind of zombie effect. And you just feel heavy all the time and numb. Sometimes people who have never been depressed think of depression as sadness, It's more
Mm-hmm.
emptiness. You don't feel anything. And so the movement, the physical movement generates body sensations. And so at least you're feeling tingling in your fingers, or your heart beating faster, or something. The blood flow is moving, and that is helping. So yeah, I'm a big proponent in just move. And it's so funny because I just had this one friend, I just know that she's still rolling her eyes because she told me this for years. She's like, just when I get on my bike, I'm just so happy. And I'd be, yeah, right, sure. Uh-huh. Yeah. And she's right. She was right.
Well, that reiterates the point. When you're ready, you're ready.
Yes, that was
When
my.
there's an opening, there's an opening, and crisis for a lot of people can create an opening. It can create a doorway. I mean, that can lead you down many paths. So here you found something that was really, really beneficial to you in several different ways. And then you deal with ankle swelling. Like you,
Oh yeah.
so then it's like, oh my gosh, like it just seems like the issues they just never stop. You think, okay, I found something, I'm coasting, we're good to go, and then bam, there's another wall.
Mhm. Yeah, that was pretty much it. And a rational person might have said, well, maybe I'll start swimming. But I'm not rational and I hate water. But I just was so determined to keep running. It's a little, there is a little bit of insanity in the way it all went. In fact, a friend of mine who's read the book and knows me pretty well, but didn't know me during this period, she said to me after she'd read the book, and she said, so what did you do about your ankle? And I said, I ran 3 marathons, 28 half marathons, and more than 100 shorter races. And she said, so nothing. I said, well, yeah, basically nothing. I mean, I went to all these doctors and I tried different shoes, and I changed my form so that I'm running in a different way. It's very, very, very slight, the difference, but I'm very conscious of how it is. So I did everything I could short of the surgery that was recommended, which would have ended my running career. And I kept running. And I also, my psychiatrist is just, and my therapist too, they're just amazing. And both of them sort of said, well, it's not like you're going to run a marathon. And I hadn't really yet told them that I was obsessed with the 26.2 sticker. But their point was, it was more like, you're not going to win the marathon, or you're not, doing this to push yourself all the way to the edge. And so I felt like I could keep running, and I did. And I am very, very fortunate because I know lots of people who can't, who get injured and can't come back and can't find a way through, and they end up in the swimming pool or on the bike, and that's fantastic. And that may still happen to me. I mean, there's a chapter in here where I talk about the fact that the jury's still out. I mean, I've been running for a decade. I know people have been running for 4 decades. And so we'll see as I age what happens. But yeah, right now it's good. And it wasn't. So yeah, the book is a lot of, oh, things are great, and oh crap. And then, oh, it's good again, and oh no. And that's a lot of the story.
But that just seems like how life is sometimes. Sometimes those moments are closer than they are at other times. But as far as the ankle, you really went through it. I mean, you detail icing and wrapping and taking a break and running, but you also really demonstrated self-advocacy and empowerment in creating your own practice, that you can apply in your life in your own original way, and really just paying attention to when you can go and when you can slow down. And that is, I think, the important point of sharing stories, so that people can see a variety of different ways in which they can advocate for themselves when they're ready to do it, practices that they can apply. So can you talk about just how you felt creating your own plan and your self-empowerment and being an advocate for what you really wanted to do that was helping you?
Well, I felt a bit desperate because I'd been so bad, and the running helped so quickly that the thought of having it taken away seemed horrible. And I also had the benefit of having a meditation practice for many years, a body-centered meditation practice, mindfulness. And so I'm a bit more in touch with my body than a lot of people are. It's funny now, I see a lot of new runners because I've been in this running club for a long time, and new people come in and out. And I see these people that I know they're going to end up injured because they're just not listening to the bodies. So I was able to just modify the plan, but I couldn't at first. That was what was so funny. I had this plan that my friend had followed, and I had eventually joined an online running group because I wasn't ready to run in public. I mean, I was running in the neighborhood, but I wasn't ready to run like with other people in a group. And so I went to the online group, and they said, slow down. And I thought, slow down? Oh, okay. And then the weeks of the running plan would get more and more intense, and I couldn't do that. And so because of my mental health issues, my mind would say, oh, well, it was fun for a while, but you're done. And then that would take a couple days for me to go, wait a minute, that's not necessarily true. And then go to the online running group, and they'd say, no, just break the week up. Repeat that one until it's easy. And I was rocket science, and it just really felt, and it's not like I hadn't done that in other areas of my life, but there was just something about that. So the combination of being awake enough to my body, to know, okay, we can't push this too hard. And it's also a place where I have a tendency toward hypochondria. And so that it's probably more hypervigilance. I'm not hypochondriac to the extent that, other people might be, but it's a hypervigilance. And so that probably served me well, because as soon as I would feel a pain, instead of ignoring it or not even being aware of it, I would stop. And I think that actually helped me in the long run. So that awareness. But other people who were doing it. Again, now it was this online group, and they would say, well, just break the program down. And the end goal of the plan was to be able to run 3 miles in 30 minutes. I still can't do that. I probably never will be able to do that. And so I said to the people, I was lamenting, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And they said, well, neither can we. And I just, I was like, oh my gosh. So it was about, again, having other people to whom I could relate, share their experience, and going, oh, okay, I'll try that. And then modifying it. So it wasn't, like I said, I think the meditation practice helped because I was used to being awake to that. I was also in therapy and had a psychiatrist, both of whom were very, very supportive because they saw the benefits very quickly, long before I did. I had a husband who's amazing. He has his own hashtag, the 100% good husband, because he's really kind of amazing. But he would say to me, are you sure you can't do that? Have you tried this? Or have you asked somebody? And he wasn't pushing. He's never been the kind that would push me, but he would just ask questions, be curious. And that helped me kind of step out of the fear. Cause I still, my first response to everything is, oh no, still. And so I'm just kind of a highly anxious person. And so I have to back off from that and say, okay, what's really going on and what can I do here? And that, people talk about this great self-care, but for me, it was desperation. It was desperation. And I've heard this phrase about the gift of desperation. You talk about the gift of crisis. I feel like that's what I had. So.
Mm-hmm. So Ed played the role of asking open-ended questions, which are so important because the type of questions you ask in the midst of whatever it is that is going on can determine the direction that you go in. And when you ask certain questions, you're provided an answer at the level of your consciousness in a language that you can understand. So for him to ask, are you sure? Did you try this? It sounds very encouraging.
Yeah, he was very supportive. And I know now when the relatives, friends, support people of other depressed people come to me and say, oh, so-and-so has to read this book. That's one of the things I might talk about is being curious rather than pushy.
Mm.
People don't realize they're being pushy. They really mean well. They want the person to get well. They're worried. And I could tell I was worried. But we had been married for more than 20 years. And our first wedding anniversary, the weekend before our, or not, the weekend after our first wedding anniversary, I was in the psych ward. So this is a guy who has been through it with me. And, I think I wish we had more training and things like that. And I think the thing that you're doing here is very, very important so that people understand this whole idea of being supportive versus putting an extra burden on somebody who's already barely able to stand.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's very important to hold a loving space,
Mm-hmm.
a non-judgmental loving space, because you can only assume that you know how someone feels, but you really don't if you're not in their shoes. And in Depression Hates a Moving Target, you write, some days I thought I could run forever. I wish I'd never given up on running years before and dreamed of running longer distances. Other days, I couldn't remember what had possessed me to run in the first place. This is very similar to the beginning stage of learning to meditate. When you begin to meditate or whatever new practice it is, the goal is to continue. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I study with a man named Shinzen Young, and I'm sure he's not the only one who's ever said this, but he talks about the practice. The only way to fail at meditation is to not do it, and that's really true with running too, because even now, I mean, all these races later, I've run thousands of miles. That first mile, my head will say, this is ridiculous. Whose idea was this? You have a lot better things to do with your time. And there's pancakes. We should have pancakes. It's just like the chatter. And but now I know, and again, the meditation practice really helped with this. But I know now that it will pass and it will come back and it will pass and it will come back. And so instead of trying to push the thoughts away, I mean, sometimes I do distract myself and I'll have a conversation with somebody, or I tend to not use earbuds because I did dog and I almost got hit by a truck once, and just too scary. But I will, maybe drop into my feet, use some mindfulness practices. But often I'll just say to my mind, thank you for the information. I know you are trying to help me. You really do think I'm trying to kill myself, but I'm not. Just give me a minute. Let's just go another few minutes and see how it goes. And so instead of fighting it, I accept it, thank it, and keep going. Because I know that there's a lot of very powerful techniques about changing your thoughts, and they work really well for some people. And for me, I end up just in a loop. It doesn't really actually go anywhere. But if I can get to this more open-handed, open-hearted place where I realize that this is just another part of me that really does think we're in danger here. And I just need it to calm down. I just need it to be reassured, almost like a kid, it's like it's a little child or something. And so I'll talk to myself like that. And I mean, not when I'm in a group, I do it in my mind, but I'll say, thank you. I understand that you're concerned, and we're just going to give it a little time. Just give me a little time here and we'll see how it goes. That's going to practice.
I mean, whatever you need, because the mind chatter, it's going to be there. I do think as you continue to meditate, for me, it feels as if it's not as jarring and it's not as loud. It's like somebody parting curtains, peeking through, like, you should start worrying again, as to where before there was like, what are those things you speak into? No, why am I thinking fog?
Megaphone, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was like that. So it's going to be there, but with your practice, it just lessens. And so, but you start to see that as you continue, but it really is important to have your own personal strategies and practices, whatever is calming and soothing for you. If it's talking to your mind from a non-judgmental place, a compassionate place, say, I know you're there. I know you're just trying to help, but let's take a minute. That's fine. If you feel that you need to create your own 4-line prayer. I'm not afraid, I'm not alone, whatever it is that you need to say that helps to calm you, taking the deep breaths, the conscious breath, anything that helps to calm you in the moment so that you can keep going throughout your day is helpful, however you personalize it.
I
So,
do use mantras too. Sometimes I use a mantra, especially on a really long run, because at some point you get so tired that I can't, when the thoughts arise, the negative, scary thoughts arise, I might not be able to reframe it. But if I have a mantra at hand, I can just chant that. And it'll be something really simple. Like I said, 4 words: run strong, run free, run strong, run free. Something like that. Or I am fine, I am fine. Use something. And that can just completely short circuit it too. But that doesn't work for me at first. That only works when I'm exhausted. So.
well, but you're adapting.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're including, you're taking away, you're seeing what you need, what you no longer need.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. So how did you allow crisis to deepen your understanding of yourself to become a better person instead of a bitter person?
Well, I have never been the kind of person that I've always turned the fault inward. So there's a lot of people that will turn it and say, oh, the world is awful to me, and
Yes.
I'm a victim. Well, I do it the opposite. Like, I'm awful, and if I would just be better, then everything will be fine. So it's a little different twist, but it's the same energy. It's just a mirror. It's just, instead of out, it's in. And so a lot of what I had to do, or what kind of happened in the process, was realizing that I was always doing the best I could. That I was always doing the best I could. And that, it sounds so simple, but it's really huge when I'm a perfectionistic, anxious, often compulsive person who, beats myself up. That's what I do. And so to have that compassion for myself has been enormous. And I don't know why running seemed to help me with that. I haven't done any research on that, but I just feel, I think that there's something going on with the mind that relaxes that part of me. I still can be very compulsive. I can be very, very driven, and I can be very competitive. It's very funny because we're all at the back of the pack. The people that run my pace, we're way at the end of the race, and we are competing with each other just as viciously as the people at the front of the race. But still, there's just this open-heartedness. And so that's been the process for me, is just coming to a place of knowing that I'm really doing the best I can. And, I ask myself that, am I doing the best I can? Is there anything else I can do? And sometimes there is, but often, no, this is it. This is what I'm doing. And it's just, and when I think about where I've come from, it's really incredible. Really, it just is. I have been trying to get a book published basically since 1994. And finally in 2019, it happened. And that's just phenomenal to me. So.
I love that so much, Nita. It's so important to not beat yourself up and to just say the words, I am enough. I'm doing the best I can. And when you could ask the other part of the question, am I doing enough? Like, when that's there. But it's just so important because you have to give yourself the encouragement that you give to other people. It's so easy to you're wonderful, you're doing great, and then when it comes to ourselves, there could be so much judgment. I'm terrible. Yes. I'm not doing this good enough. But and the second part that's so important about what you said is to look at where you've come from, how much progress you've made. Just those are such important points. I'm really glad that you brought that up. So what has been the most surprising or unexpected part of finding a gift in a crisis for you?
I touched about it a little bit before, and it's suddenly becoming, I guess you could call it an accidental mental health advocate. I really didn't see that coming. I knew I wanted to share my story. I knew that there were people that would resonate, but I didn't expect having a book published to suddenly turn you into an expert, which, you know,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
kind of a weird thing. Kind
Yeah.
of a weird thing how it happens. All of a sudden, you know, you're the author of. But the whole journey has too. I was very, very fortunate to share on a live show called This Is My Brave with 12 other people. And it was phenomenal to get up there, and I read just a little, like 5-minute monologue about my the effect of my mental health issues on my husband. And to have people come up and say, oh my gosh, I just never thought of it that way. And the same thing with the book, to have people say, you're in my head. And then also the people that, you know, I want my daughter to read this. I want my son to read this. I want my mother to read this, that kind of thing. I just didn't expect it. I don't know, just to be like that. And it's been phenomenal. It's been very, very good. Like I said, I can be an anxious perfectionistic person. And so I have to be careful to take plenty of space for myself and always be kind to myself, and to step through the open doors, because I'm doing stuff. I mean, just even this, you know, this would never have happened. This would have happened in 1990 when I was practicing law. But then after I had, you know, my major depressive episode, it was as if those skills had completely vanished, and I didn't ever think they would come back. But having a purpose, having a message to share with people, having an experience that has moved me so much and that I can see other people relate to, it's transformative, really, for me. It is very, very powerful. So that's been the surprise.
Mm-hmm. And another gift is to share what you've learned.
Yes.
And not to say that I have found the way, but to simply live your life, be an example, be authentic, do what you're going to do, and you will touch people in ways you could have never anticipated. I totally understand that, what you were saying about the book.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Your book's a lot like that too.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you tell us about your upcoming project that's coming out in the spring of 2020, and your free gift, and about your current book?
Yes. So the next thing, I've been teaching writing for, 20 years now, and I've been collecting quotes. And another woman named Becca Anderson approached me and said, let's collaborate on a book it's like a writing journal that has writing quotes. So she has written a foreword, and I've written an introduction, and then I've organized quotes by famous authors and a few unknowns, but authors I love, into chapters. And so it's a journal. It's a lot of blank pages. It's a place for people to doodle, plan, do writing practice, morning pages, whatever you want to call it, free write, hopefully to spark their creativity. Because a lot of people, I just hear so many people being blocked. I mean, that's what my class is about, is writer's blocks. So yeah, it's called You Should Be Writing. And it's a journal of inspiration and instruction for keeping your pen moving. And it's coming out from Mango with Becca Anderson in June of 2020. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's been sort of a whirlwind project that I think it's really suits, you know, this having taught for so long. So yeah. And the gift that I have is the first chapter of Depression Hates a Moving Target.
Yay.
Just going to have we're just going to have a link for you, and you can access that.
With
and
the
then
password. I will provide.
Yeah, with the password, right? It has that little password. So yeah, and then this is the book, Depression Hates a Moving Target. And so that's me down there. This makes me so happy. I have to say, I just love that.
I know.
It doesn't get old. I don't know if it ever get old.
I don't think it does. It's great.
Yeah, and so it's available wherever fine books are sold. The big A is where everybody buys stuff, but I love independent bookstores, and any independent bookstore can get that book. It also, there's Tantor Media bought the audio rights. So there is an audio book on Audible. It's through Tantor also, and an ebook. And your library can get it also if you would like. It's in the library. So it's available anywhere.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful read. Although you're dealing with heavy subject matter, you are incredibly funny. I love that part. I can't remember which marathon it was, but that was the funniest thing ever, Nita. When you wore the tank top that said, "If found on the ground, drag me across the finish line."
That was actually my first 5K.
Oh my God, that is something I would wear.
Yep. I have one now that says, if you can read this, it has it on the back of the shirt. It says, if you can read this, I'm not last. So it's a whole,
love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say that I've always had a sense of humor that possibly sometimes it might be a little inappropriate, but I think it's been very, very helpful. The fact that I, can kind of laugh at myself, not in a bad way, but go, okay,
Yeah.
this situation is absurd, really. Anybody looking at this from the outside would think this is crazy too. So it really helps. But I'm so glad you appreciate it.
I loved it. I loved it so much. Depression Hates a Moving Target, How Running with My Dog Brought Me Back from the Brink. Nita Sweeney was our guest this afternoon. And if you'd like to learn more about Nita, you can find information at nitasweeney.com. Thank you so much for joining me today, Nita. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. I knew I would. I was really looking forward to this.
I have been too. I just love speaking with you, Bridget. And just your whole book, The Gift of Crisis, just even the title, but then of course the book itself, that your journey is so inspiring. And so when I first met you, I thought, this is a woman I am going to like. And that has been true. So thank you.
I know, I feel the same way. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Gift of Crisis Video Summit.
Thank you.